and welcome to a new podcast called Kirk Chats. My name is Reverend Jasmine Smart, and it is such a gift to be with you in this podcast. I'm joined today by Reverend Dr. Charles B. Hardwick, the interim director of the Synod of the Covenant, and I'll let him explain a little bit more about that. Today, we are focusing on the month of November and thankfulness and how excited we are to bring that to our whole year, but especially this year, we really focus on gratitude and what that means in our lives. So Chip is willing to talk about that a little bit with us today. This is meant to just inspire us to think about our faith and our life and how our world is constantly changing, and we'll get to do that today. So thank you for joining me.
Great, thank you so much for having me, Jasmine. Jasmine is one of my very favorite people. I'm always bragging about Jasmine, so now I get to do it on a podcast. So I'm glad. Thank you so much for inviting me.
That's not how this works. It's supposed to be the other way around. But all right, we'll both lift each other up in this podcast for sure. I'm very excited to have you.
Yeah.
To introduce yourself, can you tell us a little bit about Synod of the Covenant?
Sure. Yeah, the Synod of the Covenant. For those of you who are Presbyterian, you might be a super Presbyterian and already know what a synod is, but for non-super Presbyterians, there's the local church, and then presbyteries are geographically larger than a local church. So we're in Detroit Presbytery, and then the next level up geographically is called a synod. It's spelled S-Y-N-O-D, so it looks like synod, but it's pronounced synod. And our synod, the Synod of the Covenant, is all of Michigan, most of Ohio, and a little bit of Kentucky, and a little bit of Indiana. And there are 11 presbyteries and almost 700 churches in the Synod of the Covenant, and about 100,000 Presbyterians. So on behalf of all of those Presbyterians, I bring you greetings this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate that you are our interim executive. Can you say a little bit more about what your role looks like and what you do with that?
Yeah, so there were some problems with the Synod that really came to a head in early 2020. And the General Assembly, the next level up above the Synod geographically, the National Church, decided that in order to kind of resolve the issues and the problems, that they took what's called as original jurisdiction, which means they basically took control of the synod, and they released all the staff, and they stopped all the ministries, and they put a hold on all the commissioners, and they basically said, whoa, we got to get our act together before we move forward. And so just last weekend or 2 weekends ago, the General Assembly gave us back our jurisdiction. They said, we're ready to go. We're ready to be on our own again. And that was super exciting. So
right.
I've been on staff, and we just called a new stated clerk and a new treasurer, and all the commissioners are on committees now. You know how Presbyterians love committees. So we have all of our committees set up, and it's really looking bright. And we're doing everything we can to equip the presbyteries and equip churches to do more faithful ministry.
Yes, I love how you just came right out and said there were problems. Like, to me, you're a problem solver.
I thought you were going to say, to me, you're a problem.
No, you're the problem solver, and you come in and that's something you like doing, right, with ministry.
Yes, I do, right.
Yeah,
So it's been great.
Well, we are happy to have you. I'm happy that the Synod, it was in Cincinnati. Now you're housed here at Kirk in the Hills, just on the other side of the building, and it's nice because it feels like you're in our backyard.
Yeah.
But in general, too, this all happened right as pandemic was happening. So you came in and really just grasped the virtual interactions, right? And in a way, it almost makes your job easier because you have the virtual. You get to go to way more Presbyterian meetings.
I get to go to 11 Presbytery meetings. Lucky me.
Sometimes in the same day, like you're hopping
4
from back.
on one day that's coming up next month.
Oh
4 on one day.
Well, I appreciate that you've jumped into doing that. You haven't shrunk back from that you've put your whole self in that, and you feel really accessible to us. As pastors, you've put on these different seminars to help us with our preaching and our ministry, and I'm grateful for that. You told me once that, if Synod, if you weren't doing anything, it's not like we would run up to you and be like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like a Presbytery exec or a pastor, they get those types of calls. But anything you've done is just kind of a gift and a joy and an abundance, it felt like to me, in the midst. And really connecting, different synods probably have different kind of personalities, but connecting us and especially like Michigan, Ohio being the core chunk, that we have a lot of similarities in what our churches look like. And so your offerings for us have kind of helped bring unity too in that. Yeah. So I hope you've seen that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, my icebreaker for you was to ask you to bring an object that was important to you in your faith life. And if you could describe what you brought and why you brought it.
Sure. This is such an interesting question, and so I'm going to hold this up close to the camera, and I'll describe it while I do. This is a small, I guess it's pottery. It's very heavy. It probably weighs, I would say it weighs 6 or 8 pounds. It's about 4 inches high, and it's a sculpture of a large, like an adult's hand, holding a baby's hand or a small child's hand, and the small child's hand is wrapped around the index finger of the adult, and the adult has his thumb around that. And this was given to me by one of my very close friends when I was in seminary, and he gave this. There were 3 of us that ran around together, and he bought one for himself and gave me one and gave our other friend one. And so and he said what he liked about it was that there was the big hand and the small hand, which went together to form one object. And it reminds me a lot of how we have this little hand that we put into God's big hand. Mm-hmm. You know, the proportions are off on this. If it was God's hand, of course, it would be as big as this office, maybe even bigger. And our hand would probably be smaller. But the idea that we can place our hand into God's hand and feel like we're one together and walking together and working together and being challenged together, and that that I'm not alone in my ministry or in my life. I'm single, and it can be lonely being single. And so I'm so thankful that I have this reminder, this very tangible reminder that even though I'm single and I might spend time alone, it doesn't mean I'm lonely, because I have not just God's hand, but also friends like my friend Carrie, who gave this to me. I'm just really thankful for the friendships I have. It's been so easy to make friends in the Detroit Presbytery. I'm so glad that I've made so many friends since I got here. And this reminds me of my friend Carrie and other friendships. And I was just with Carrie this past weekend in Philadelphia. And so I'm just reminded of how thankful I am for friends like him.
Yeah. And it looks a little bit weathered too, like, no matter what life throws at us, we still have those hands clasped together. Do you have a scripture story that maybe kind of illustrates some of that partnership, or?
It's a funny story, but as I was explaining it, I was thinking about when God and Israel make covenants together, and that they're not equal covenants, right? God chooses to be in relationship with the Israelites. The Israelites, if they're the baby's hand, sometimes they're holding on tight, sometimes they're trying to get out, right. It reminds me of the covenants that God makes with Israel and with us, that God is super powerful and so much bigger and greater, and he could just run us over. But instead he wants to be in a relationship with us, even knowing that we're not going to be as consistent as God is, but still wants to be in relationship with us.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what came to mind for me too, that Jacob wrestling with the angel, Israel, Jacob becoming Israel and getting renamed, and just how the Jewish people and the church has always wrestled with God, and how that's a good thing. That's okay. Like, that almost could be like a little wrestling class, right? That they're kind of holding. Yeah,
they could be arm wrestling,
right?
But I know who's going to win. If they're arm wrestling, the adult is definitely going to win.
Sometimes it's that wrestling, sometimes it's that gentle parental feel as well, the friendship. Yeah, I mean, there's so much there. But at the same time, I mean, the fact that Israel sometimes would run from that, like you shared, but it's unequal. God is always there. Is there a time that this reminds you of that kind of spurs you toward gratitude, that you really felt that God was reaching out to you, and in a very good Reformed theology that, God makes the first move towards us and we respond? Like, how does that interact for you with gratitude?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't remember exactly when Carrie gave me this, but when I was at the seminary in the master's program, my mom died suddenly and tragically, and it just really turned my world upside down. My counselor said, when I was complaining about how I just had a hard time making progress, he said, well, you should think about it as if you're upside down, walking on your hands, and every other person is walking straight up. And how disorienting it was, and yet, as hard as it was there, I can't imagine how hard it would have been somewhere else. So my sister came home for the funeral, which was on a Saturday, and went back to work on Monday, as if nothing had changed.
Wow.
And I was home for 2.5 weeks. I could be with my dad as he, like, in the very intensity of his grief, and then. When I went back, I had friends like Carrie and others who really walked with me. I remember the third friend that Carrie gave this to would call me every day before lunch and say, do you feel like you can go to lunch today by yourself? Do you want me to go with you, or do you want me to bring you something?
Yeah.
And if it was such a tangible reminder of God's love and the hand-in-hand nature of God's love, to feel like there's somebody that's walking with me, knows me well enough to know that I won't know until that time whether I can go, whether I not go. And so it really makes me thankful that I don't just, it's not just like an academic understanding that God is walking with me, or like something that I simply know with my head to be true. But because of instances like this, I feel like God has given me this great gift of showing me with real people what it means to be loved and walked with. And so I'm just so grateful for that.
Well, thank you for sharing that story. I think in terms of how we often talk about responding to someone in grief, that is a really good metaphor of them being upside down and us just trying to walk alongside. And instead of saying, like, so often at a funeral, it's just easy to say, like, well, I'm here for anything you need, right?
Yes,
but those friends who really just say, no, I'm actually gonna show up.
Right,
and you can say no, you can make me leave, but I'm gonna show up and bring you the food before you ask it, and ask you if you want to sit, like if you want company that day or not. And both of those options making you not feel alone, even if you were sitting there alone, you know you're not alone.
Right.
Yeah. And especially over food. I mean, you brought up food. How has that kind of been for you in your life in terms of fellowship with other people, or your relationship with God too?
Yeah, I remember. I don't know where I was living, and a preacher was talking about the times when food has really been like this feast, like this rich meal. And I thought back when I got out of college, there was this family. I lived in a small town in Kentucky, Elizabethtown, Kentucky. There were about, I don't know, maybe 15,000 people that lived there. And I had a great church that I went to. I was the only person that was 23 years old pretty much at this church. But they really enveloped me and loved me. And there was a family who didn't live far from me. And sometimes I would just show up at their house at like 5:45. Yeah. Knowing that I would be able to just join them for dinner. Like no, like I didn't call them ahead of time. Like now as I say this, I'm kind of horrified. But it was small time life in the late 80s, right? So it was a long time ago.
Yeah, before cell phones.
Yeah, before cell phones, but there and it was just so enveloping. I remember I used to, sometimes when I lived there, I would go to Walmart if I got bored, because I knew I would see people that I knew, because it was a small enough town. And it was like the knowledge that I could just show up there and would be welcomed and would be loved. And I would also get a good meal. Often pork chops on the grill, the things I remember, pork chops on the grill and a new potato salad with ranch dressing on it. That's what I would like to get there. And I remember when I was moving, the mother said something to me like, well, maybe you've just been an angel here among us for 2 years, like in a small town, where people live a long time.
Right.
To only live there for 2 years felt to them like an extraordinarily short period of time. And I thought to myself, I'm not the one that's the angel. I'm the one showing up to your house for dinner unexpected. You're the ones that are angels for me.
But it was mutuality. That they were blessed by your youth and enthusiasm, and that offering hospitality gave them a gift too. It was really, I'm really thankful for them. Very thankful for them. And so when I think about it, there are other meals. My aunt's house, her housemate had formerly worked for a gourmet caterer, and so the food there at that house was always amazing. And they're both gone now, and but I think it also was like a little taste of heaven. When you're surrounded by love and good food, it's hard to beat that. Yeah, those are great ingredients for sure. Well, let's just take a quick break, and when we come back, I'd like to ask you about maybe, since so much of our meals often center around prayer, talking about prayer and gratitude a little bit. So we'll be right back. Welcome back to our podcast, Kirk Chats, where we talk about faith and life in our changing world. I'm here with Reverend Dr. Chip Hardwick, and we are just discussing gratitude and prayer and friendships and all sorts of things in our lives. And we should mention that you went to Princeton Theological Seminary. So the story you just shared was I can imagine it, in the cafeteria there. And so many of us pastors here at the Kirk all kind of went. I don't think you and I overlapped.
We didn't overlap, but I overlapped with Nate. So I was in the PhD program when Nate was in the MDiv program, and we knew each other, but we've gotten to know each other, well, of course, better now, but we got to know each other better between when we finished before I moved here. Yeah. And that's been a great friendship.
Right. Once you graduate, you kind of have that cohort, and you're all kind of looking at the same positions across the country and things like that, and you start to know people's names from that. Well, we were talking about meals and prayer, and one thing this reminds me of is, it's not quite the right shape, but with hands, we so often associate it with praying hands. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how prayer has been for you in your life and how that associates with gratitude.
Yeah, it's funny. I started in 1998 in the Princeton Seminary Chapel. One of my friends in his senior sermon encouraged us to keep a journal where we write down like 4 things we're thankful for every night. And I thought he was like this spiritual giant, but it turns out he saw it on Oprah. And so he was not as much of a giant as
I thought it was Oprah.
Yes,
too.
He saw it on Oprah. But the takeaway for me is since like October of 1998,
wow. Okay.
I have been keeping a journal of writing down 4 things that I'm thankful for not a journal now, journals and journals and journals of things that I've been thankful for. And I love, periodically I'll look back and see where I was the year before or what I was doing. I end up, for my devotions, I have a Through the Bible in a Year. And so I have done that, I think, since 2004. I don't always make it all the way through, but I start it and I pick up where I can. And so often, like, I'll try to have one of the things that I'm thankful for, something that I've been reminded of in the passage, and then other things that have just happened today. Like, I'm sure I'll write tonight, I'm thankful I got to spend time with Jasmine today working on this podcast, or I'm thankful for the good weather today, or my cats are often around, so I'm thankful for my cats a lot. But the discipline of writing down 4 things every night and trying, first of all, it keeps my prayers from being gimme, 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 and then it also helps me broaden my focus of what I'm thankful for, because I don't want to just write the same things again and again and again.
Right. Yeah, I like that connection of the scripture informing that, because I also heard about this on Oprah, and I've done it, and like I've told other people they should do it. I don't know if I've
so now we're telling you you should do it.
Well, and now I'm encouraged to try and do it. For that dedication is really impressive, I have to say, and letting the scripture kind of inform obviously the things that we go through. You seem like a pretty positive person all around, but maybe it's a facade. I don't know. But have there been times, like obviously times of struggle or different things are kind of going on? How does staying grateful and doing this practice, regardless of what you're feeling, kind of keep you grounded, I guess?
Yeah, I think there have definitely been times in my life when it has been difficult to know, to articulate what to be thankful for. And I think that the practice, when you do something as a practice, it shapes you into the person that the practice shapes you into, and so I think it helps me to notice small things when the big things aren't things that I can be thankful for. And I think that it has helped me to live out, Paul says, give thanks in all circumstances. And I'm not sure I can give thanks in all circumstances at a very high level, but I can find things to be thankful for in all circumstances, which I'm really grateful for. And I think a lot about this quote by a theologian named Karl Barth, B like boy, Arth. He was a theologian in Europe and around in the mid 1900s, and he has this quote about how grace and gratitude go together like the ocean and the shore, like the voice and an echo, like thunder and lightning, and I like to add like Sunny and Cher, only more than Sunny and Cher, because they actually stays together. But it reminds me that, and what he says is, if God is primarily a God of grace, which we believe, then humans can be primarily people of gratitude. That when we realize what God has done for us, what we're motivated to do is give thanks, and that's something that I strive to keep in my mind all the time.
I think about, every Thanksgiving there's the same scriptures come up in the lectionary. So I've preached this a couple times. I think I preached it at the Kirk a few years ago. There's a passage in Deuteronomy that is just like talking about all these amazing things, like the pomegranates, and that pomegranates really stood out to me in that passage, because I'm sure it's a thing in Israel, they're everywhere, but for us reading it, I was like, there's honey and there's the wheat and all the things that it lists, all the blessings, but pomegranates, like just that kind of small thing. So when I did my senior sermon at Princeton, I preached it, and I they kind of let you be creative and explore things. So I'm like, it'll be so cool if I like decorate the table and had a baptismal font, because I had water imagery, and then I had these pomegranates sitting there. Probably no one really cared except for me, but it was just to be reminded of those small things when that is something tangible. Sometimes when you think about people, this is kind of a weird transition, but like if you're having a panic attack or something, like they tell you should focus on things you can see, things you can hear, like 4 things you can see, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can touch, and 1 thing you can smell, or something like that. Like really get connected to your senses. And once you do that, and it kind of grounds you a little bit more, then you can be more connected to what's around you. And like you said, I mean, the practice of being grateful forms you. It's not just about prayer, like it is our duty, it is something that we're doing for God, but it's for us too. It shapes us and transforms us.
The thing about my, so I write in my Bible, through the year Bible, every year I write where I am, like the year number, and then where I am. And if you look at the January one, it's like every single year since 2004. But by the time you get to like October, it'll be like, how many years has it been? It's been 17 years since 2004. There might be 9 years when I made it all the way through October. But the funny thing is, so I'll be like, but I almost always start back. It's like, well, it's January, I'm going to start back. And in January, then I think, why did I ever stop doing this? Why did I ever stop? I like reading the Bible. Reading the Bible is great. It really helps connect me to Christ. It really helps me, like, center me at the end of the day. It really, like, connects me to my faith. I really do, often I feel like God is saying something very specific through the passages. And it's like that with prayer. For me, like, it's easy to get out of the habit, but then whenever I start back up, I am so grateful that I started back up. So if you happen to be someone that's fallen out of a habit that's brought you meaning before, I hope you'll give it a try and get back in the habit.
Or try a new habit.
Or a new habit, right.
Like I said, I've done like middle school Bible studies, and I told them about this gratitude thing. And we talked about Oprah. Because Oprah brought it up because, like, for her, it makes you happier. So even people outside the Christian tradition kind of can do this gratefulness practice. It feels to me there's been more language around that in recent years about being grateful and how it can shape you and make you happier. But yeah, then to actually practice that myself, I haven't done. So you've encouraged me to try it for 1 year, or at least 1 month, and give myself grace when I mess up and don't do it every day. But if you have a practice like that, or you want to try this practice, I really like that idea of reading scripture and letting it inform the gratitudes too. So this time of year, when we gather with friends and family, and we're grateful for them. Some of us go around the Thanksgiving Day table and we say one thing we're grateful for. Is there a way we can make that not boring? Because, I mean, it's not always, but sometimes it's like, okay, the food's hot, we're ready to eat.
Right.
But now we have to go around and everyone says they're thankful for their family, So, like, how can we make that a more interactive and really focus on the right things in this season?
Yeah, I wonder... Well, first of all, I wonder if you might do it while you're eating.
Yes.
So then the food, but then it doesn't have to be rushed, right?
Yeah, right.
And the first thing that comes into my mind is, is it an I Spy game or something where you have to find things that start with the specific letters of the alphabet? Like, I wonder if it might be more fun and funnier if the first person had to say something they were thankful for that began with an A, B, C, D, and just keep going around until you get all the way through, and then it causes more creativity and more, and hopefully people could still think of things that they're actually thankful for, except for Z. I don't know, zebras or zippers, or I don't know, I don't know what they might be thankful for.
Some days I am really grateful for zippers.
And I don't know if, and I also don't know if it might be more meaningful. Oh, I've got a great idea. Actually, Jasmine didn't tell me the questions ahead of time, but I got an even better idea. So Psalm, I think it's 136, is the psalm that has after every phrase, there's the people respond, for God's steadfast love endures forever. And it goes, it's a lot of verses, and every verse is, so give thanks to the God above, for God's steadfast love endures forever. Give thanks to the creator of all. God's steadfast love endures forever. You say God's steadfast love endures forever over and over and over and over again. It's kind of the drumbeat of Israel's life together, is that God's love endures forever. And I have used it before where I ask people, then what are you thankful for? And then they will tell a little story about one day Jasmine invited me to be on this podcast, and it was really fun to think about this, and it made me realize how important it is to keep a journal for me, and reading the scriptures. I need to make sure that I finish the year strong. And then somebody else would say, so let's give thanks to the God who puts us in touch with just the right people. And then everybody says together, God's steadfast love endures forever. That you kind of sum up what the person had to offer with that drumbeat, the same drumbeat.
That's a great way to do it. Yeah, to have that summary and hear one another and really reflect on that. Yeah, when you bring that verse up, I mean, that to me, that steadfast love has been such an important. I'm going to be the nerdy person and bring up the Hebrew, and I can't do it. You can probably say it better. Hesed. Can you do it with the
Hesed?
Hesed. And this word just has so much to it. Sometimes it's translated mercy or different kinds of love, but that steadfast love is really the heart of it. And Walter Brueggemann has translated it tenacious solidarity. Mm-hmm. So that's what your hands kind of reminded me of too, this never letting go type of love that is always with us and is steadfast, that drumbeat beneath everything we go through. And if we have the space to be grateful and we do practice that, then we're connected to that love and that grace, like you said with Karl Barth.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It's been so lovely. Are there any final thoughts you have on gratitude for us?
Well, I'm grateful for the chance to talk with you, and I'm grateful so much for all of you there at Fox Run. You have really important lives and ministries. It may not feel like it, but you can make people there feel at home in a way that people like Jasmine and I can't. You can reach out to your neighbors. You can care for them. You can help their lives look a little bit more the way that God wants them to look because you're their neighbors. And so I'm grateful for you and your ministry there. And of course, I'm grateful to the Kirk too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course. Yeah, your story about going to the couple's house, in Elizabethtown. I mean, I think about that with Fox Run. They're neighbors to one another, so they really see one another's lives more intimately. And you can tell when someone's struggling, if someone's going through grief, and you have your own grief stories, so you can use those stories to support each other and be there for each other, and be the hands that hold on to each other and be loving toward each other, for sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us with Kirk Chats today. And thank you to Reverend Dr. Chip Hardwick and his presence and reminding us to be grateful. We always give thanks to Reverend Dr. Nate Phillips, senior pastor here at Kirk in the Hills, and Joan Han-Peter, the coordinator at Kirk West at Fox Run. We hope you join us again next week on Kirk Chats as we have another guest and we keep talking about faith, life, and our changing world. See you next week.